Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Restaurant Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and we have given a lot of love to savory cooking in these live episodes of Restaurant Hoppen. We've done a food trucks episode. We've done pizza and barbecue and burgers. And I realized as I was starting to plan out the next one, I haven't given a lot of love to sweets or baking. And I am changing that tonight by bringing on three of my very favorite bakers in Omaha. We've got Stacey Leick, Katina Talley, and Kathy Silvey joining me on the stage tonight. Guys, can we give a round of applause? Welcome to the show. Okay, so because we have multiple voices and multiple concepts going on here, I would love for each of you to just introduce yourselves briefly and tell me a little bit about your concept. We'll start with you, Stacey.
All right, I am Stacey Leick, and I started Buttered Marshmallow 5 years ago. My concept was simply to bake the very best that I could possibly bake for every single customer and expand out my skills as I went along. I'm not trained officially. It's all self-training. So everything that I'm doing is a learning process until I get it squared away. There we go.
If you ever want the best cake of your life, Sarah's Chocolate Dream Cake. I might be biased because it's named after my wife, but it might be the greatest thing that you'll ever eat.
Thank you.
At least top 5.
I'm Katina Talley. I own Sweet Magnolias Bake Shop, which I started back in 2016. Our philosophy is that we bake everything from scratch, and it is unapologetically indulgent. So we don't cut any corners. It's certainly not healthy, but that's why we're here.
Well, I own a catering company, a Catered Affair. We have been in business since 2008. We opened our brick and mortar cafe 3 years ago. We'll be celebrating our 3-year anniversary in September. And we really got into the baked goods and baking kind of as we opened our cafe. And my husband said, we got to have a great cinnamon roll. And we've done everything we can to try to accomplish that. And we've evolved into different baking, savory, cupcakes. Carly's our pastry chef. She does amazing cakes. She started at Cupcake Island and kind of grew her teeth in that. And we've just kind of blown up our baking side of our business. And it's remarkable.
Now, real quick, we're going to talk mostly about sweets and baking tonight, but because I was at a Catered Affair today, I have to give a shout out. If you want a good Reuben, go to a Catered Affair because they have a banging Reuben. I don't know why I just used the word banging. I'm not a 17-year-old. Anyway, let's move on before I get too embarrassed. So I'm going to lead off with what might seem like an obvious question, but I think it's a good place to start. In your mind, what are the main differences between cooking and baking? What separates those two things?
Precision.
How so?
Oh, you have to follow recipes for baking. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to toss in some flour and some sugar and maybe some eggs and then baking powder or baking soda or salt. Everything has to be measured precisely. Otherwise, you're not going to get a consistent product.
I think it's a science, literally. It's like a science experiment. If you're off a minute amount of any ingredient, the entire thing does not work. I mean, we've all seen the sourdough starter on Instagram and blowing up on people. That's basically baking in a nutshell, I think, where it's literally a science, and then you just put funky, fun ingredients together, and that's kind of the joy of it, I think.
For sure. There's a formula, and you have to know your formula, and once you do, then that's where the art comes in. But if you stray from that formula, you're going to have, flat cakes or, dense cookies or this and that. So,
how did each of you get into baking? What drew you to this side of the culinary world?
Eating.
That's fair.
I mean, I just love cakes and cupcakes and cookies and bakery. And I mean, we started with cookies, and just it's evolved from there. But I think you make what you love to eat, I think. And hopefully you share that with people and they love it as well.
For sure. That's like I grew up in a very food-centric household, and it was one area of the kitchen that I was allowed to own. My dad was very territorial about who was making dinner and what I could contribute, but he would let me make cookies all day, so I kind of gravitated towards that and honed those skills early on. You know, as I continued my career in food, it was just like I kept coming back to baking.
I found a frosting. I just developed this recipe that I really loved, and I started working with trying to emulate a cake from a local bakery that I just loved. And once I did that, I started making sure that at work I was the person bringing in cakes instead of other people. And the more cakes I brought in, the more I talked about it, the more I wanted to do it all the time, until the day I told my employer I'm done and I'm just going to bake full time. But it just came as a part of loving trying out new things and then getting to expand on that.
Now, you guys mentioned that baking's a very technical process. It's a science. You can't just throw stuff together and hope that it comes out okay. How did you figure out your formulas? How did you figure out that science? Were you taught by someone? Is it just trial and error over and over again? How did you get to where you are now?
Mine wasn't trial and error. It was really more looking at recipes online. So if I'm going to develop a recipe, I would go online and look at what other people were doing and getting the ratios there, because it really is about ratios. It's not, if it's 2 cups of flour and 1.5 cups of sugar, you double that. It's not 4 cups of flour and 3 cups of sugar. So I was looking at ratios, and what I came to realize, the people who are good at baking, the ratios are all very similar. So for me, it was like, okay, this is what I'm seeing. Since I'm not going to school to study this, I'm going to follow along with the people who are very successful and follow their lead. That worked.
But how do you tweak? Because obviously what people are eating tonight from buttered marshmallow is not just a recipe that you found online. That might have been the starting point, but you've tweaked it over time. Like, how did you kind of develop your signature product where this is a buttered marshmallow cake, not a cake that I found from someone else?
Well, for me, it was really a matter of, and Katina touched on this a minute ago, where you know what your bases are. So you can start with that, and then you start tweaking. What can I add to this? You add something, it turns out right. Okay, this is good. I can move on from here. You add something and you have a flat cake, a dense cake, or worse, a brick, something bad. And say, okay, that doesn't work. So you go back to what worked, and then you just add or don't add, and then you keep those ratios the same. So if you're going to add lemon, you cut your acid somewhere else. If you're going to add something salty, you cut your salt somewhere else. So you're always keeping your ingredient compositions equal.
For sure, yeah. And that's, for context, I have a degree in food science and technology. So I studied the science of food and the interaction of ingredients. And so that obviously plays a huge role into the way that I develop food. I developed for Conagra Foods for 5 years and learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work, and leaveners and acids and what interacts with different ingredients. And to your point, you have ratios in your brain of I know that this works under these conditions, and then you make a science experiment out of it. Mm-hmm. And you're like, if I introduce this new acid or this new fat, how does that interact in reality with these other ingredients that I have at play? And if you're lucky, you get it right immediately, and if you're not, it takes a few times.
I think we've had the same situation where we just play with ingredients, and how do we take a base and add this ingredient or that ingredient, and then we talk to our customers a lot. What do you guys like? I think we came out with our bacon cinnamon roll, and I was like, no one is going to eat that. Gross. And it's probably one of the most popular items that we have. So I think people have become also very interesting eaters today. I don't think they're as in a box like we once were. I think people are more interested in trying unique and different items, and also people eat with their eyes. It's got to be pretty, and I think baking more than anything, it's got to be beautiful, but it's got to taste great.
So, one quick point, to be clear, when you say bacon cinnamon roll, it's not just, a cinnamon roll with some bacon sprinkled on the top. It's strips of bacon layered into every layer of the cinnamon roll. It is an absolute just bomb of awesomeness, and I don't even want to know how much extra time you have to spend on the treadmill to work it off, but it doesn't matter because it tastes so good. But you said something really interesting there. You said you think that eaters are more, I don't remember the exact verbiage, but eaters are more interested or more interesting today, and we're a little bit more adventurous as a whole. How have you seen that play out? Why do you think that is?
Instagram, Pinterest.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I think people eat with their phones.
Yeah.
And I think people have also been, they're out of the box a little bit. Like, they're willing to try things. They're willing to go out. And I also think people don't cook a lot anymore. I think most people order DoorDash. They want things pre-made. So when they are eating things that maybe aren't as amazing, and they go out and they try something that's homemade or something that was made with love, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't remember that food could taste like that. So
That's true.
Would you guys remember the first baked good that you just like absolutely nailed, where it was like, not only do I enjoy this, but I think I have a future in this?
For me, it was my deep red raspberry cake. It was February, it was cold, and I wanted to bake. I wanted to make a raspberry cake, but not a white cake with raspberry in it. I wanted to make a cake that was so raspberry that people would just love it. So I started with this science experiment, and it worked. I remember when that raspberry cake came out of the oven, it smelled like a pan of warm raspberry. Oh my gosh, it was so good. I paired it with lemon, and I paired it with almond, and I had some friends come over to try it out with me, and that was 3 years before I started the bakery, and they're like, yeah, this right here. That was it for me.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the moment that I realized I had a future in it, but the oatmeal cookies that we serve at Sweet Mag's and that we use in our oatmeal cream pies were the recipe that I started with the Betty Crocker recipe back when I was like 8 years old, and tweaked it over and over and over again until it became the recipe that it is. And I, like, to this day, I'm still like, these are the best oatmeal cookies that exist. They really nailed it.
I think ours is very collaborative. Carly kind of runs our pastry area, but we all have a hand in it and say, let's try this ingredient. Well, those aren't big enough. Let's make them bigger. Let's add this. And I think there's a lot of trial and error in our situation, and it's very collaborative. I think it's a creative process that everybody kind of has a hand in those flavor profiles, or how to tweak something or change something. But I don't know that there was a specific, this was it.
Fair enough. So one of the things that fascinates me about baking, and I don't think I really understood it all before I started this podcast and started talking with professionals like you guys, is just how big of an effect weather and climate have on everything. Like, what you guys cooked today, if you were cooking that in December and it were 10 degrees outside instead of 85 or 90, whatever it is, wildly different. Can you kind of pull back the curtain and just explain to people how much climate, temperature, humidity, whether it's raining or not, all that can affect what you're doing and how you adjust your levels to account for that?
Pray. I think humidity plays a huge part. Heat, freezing cold. I think traveling. I think taking something you've made, this beautiful cake, and you have to get it in a car, get it somewhere, get it set up, hope that it sits okay, hope when somebody goes to cut it that it's a little bit of a white knuckle experience. So
For sure. I feel like every bakery catastrophe that I've had has happened in the month of July. So, pray for me. Yeah. But it's just, cakes melting. It's a very humid time of the year. Your doughs are all off.
Right.
teaching a staff how to adjust for those things, and kind of like the science, and not just being like, oh, just toss in flour until it looks right. Just like kind of explaining why that's happening. It's all like it is just like it adds a whole different element to the equation that we've talked about, and especially I find it way easier to bake in the winter, which is great because you don't want to leave the house anyway. But the summertime is an incredibly difficult time in terms of how it's affecting your product, how it's affecting your equipment, how it's affecting your people. It's just a really difficult time.
Too is before it gets to you. The purveyors that you're buying from. If something's been held at a weird temperature, or it's gotten really hot. It's a science. It truly is. So once you start moving around with those temperatures, it affects the base product before you've even started.
Right.
For sure.
I know for me, I bake out of my house because I'm a cottage baker, and there are some days where I'm baking 45 pans of cake, and I have one regular oven, nothing big or fancy, and I have it worked out. I know exactly how many pans of cake I can get in that oven, and I tell people it's pushing and pulling. That's what I'm doing for 4 hours, pushing and pulling, and I know exactly how long each round cake pan takes to bake. So I have it scheduled out. I'm going to start at 6:38, and I'm going to be done at 10:12. And something that's supposed to take 29 minutes takes 34. And then you got to test it you have to keep testing it every minute or every 48 seconds, and it's really that much. Google, set a timer for 12 seconds, set a timer for 39 seconds, because you don't want to overcook it. But it is annoying as all get out because it should be out of that oven in 29 minutes. But why is it 36 today? The humidity. I'm going to move to where the heat is dry.
So is there a way to adjust the science and adjust your recipes, adjust the temperatures, whatever it might be beforehand? Like, oh, maybe I use a little bit of a wetter base today, or I use a little bit more flour. Or is it more so what Stacey was talking about, where you're keeping your same recipes, but you are just constantly looking at it and just being like, okay, it's not ready. Not ready. Okay, that batch was actually ready before I expected it to be. The next one the next one I maybe cook a little bit less. Like, can you adjust beforehand, or is it all adjusting as things are baking?
Well, I'm not going to adjust my recipe because it's not going to be as humid tomorrow. So, or it might not be. It might be more. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're so fine. I feel like, the scientist in me is like, you definitely can. Like, you can game it, but it is so variable that it's probably, like, in all practical senses, not worth it. Like, it is way more about feel and adjusting on, like, observation.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Easier to look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So something that I'm interested in about baking is with cooking, you don't actually you can hold products for longer. Like, you don't start cooking a steak until someone orders it. You don't start cooking a burger until somebody orders it. Those things fire when they're called for. With baking, you got to make everything ahead of time, because it's not like somebody can come in and order a cinnamon roll and you're like, okay, well, see you in 30 minutes. Like, they expect it right then and there. So how do you account for that ahead of time, knowing how much you need for a certain day? Because it's great to sell out, like, that looks good on social media to say, hey, we're sold out, like, we're super popular. But that's also sales that you're losing out on. And if you make way too much, then you've got leftover product and you're losing money on that. So how do you try and strike that balance and figure out exactly how much you need?
Welcome to the restaurant business.
Truly.
I mean, it's just it's a little bit like baking a cake. It's a feel, so you kind of know how much you think you're going to sell on a Saturday versus a Monday. If weather's dependent on that a little bit, if it's going to rain, and you have a P-mix that you go off of, and you hope that you're correct. And some days you hit it 100%, and some days you're way off the mark. So, and in that case, you're sending cookies out the door with people. So.
Yeah, for the first 3 years, I tracked our sales in a spreadsheet and kind of like got our baseline. But, if you're lucky, you're growing. So that only helps you so much. So we've found out kind of like where our baselines are and where we start for the day. And then we just like kind of adjust. Like there's certain products that like, we have prepped and just like waiting to go in the oven. And when we see that like, oh, today's busy, we can throw in some more. But like you said, like it does, like the weather is something that like affects it a lot. Holidays, like this week is going to be dead. And I know it because everyone just, partied all weekend. So there's just like so many factors that you learn.
It's a feel. It's a feel. You just have to, It's a gut. You got to go with your gut.
I don't have to deal with that because I'm custom order only. I don't bake anything in advance. I take orders and then I bake for those orders.
That's totally fair. I would love for you guys to pull back the curtain on baking prices, because the price, and everyone in this room has felt it in the grocery store, but restaurants are feeling it even more. The prices of goods have gone up significantly over the past couple of years, really since COVID, but they haven't stopped rising. And for bakeries especially, it's been difficult. Like from 2022 to 2023, the cost of eggs increased 21%, margarine 24%, flour 18%. And those are just 3 items. Obviously, you've got a lot more. What kind of impact does that have on the business? And is there any way that you can adjust for that?
You have to raise your prices, but you have to have a balance, and it's a balancing act, which also leads back to PMIX, because you don't want to have waste. A lot of it is just being good at guessing what you think you're going to need, and it's difficult. And if you're good at it, you're good at it, and if you're not, you're probably not in business anymore. I mean, that's pretty much, it's a gut a little bit. We all have a product mix that we go off of, what we think we're going to sell every Saturday, or what we think we're going to sell every Tuesday. But, some Little League baseball team might walk in and blow you out of every cookie you own, so you just have to go with your gut a little bit. And it's a little bit, every restaurant is the same. It's a little bit of a guessing game. You anticipate what you think and there are some trends that tend to stay the same. There's things that you sell more of in the winter than you do in the summer. More, some days are busier than other days, so you have to guesstimate what you think you're going to need.
For sure. And just like, it's not always advisable, but just shopping around, like I know that our ingredient buying process could be way more streamlined, but in order to keep our prices reasonable or on the lower end, like I make it my job to run around to 5 different places and pick up flour at one and butter at the next. And, like you have to like kind of judge the trade-off. Like, is my time worth this? Like, can I raise my prices? Do I think that like the customer's in a position to buy this at a higher price? And then even from that perspective, kind of like raising prices strategically. And it's like, this 6 months stretch, we're going to raise the prices of scones. And then next, maybe we'll bump cookies a little bit. And also looking at competitors and seeing what they're charging. And like, can somebody go get a cookie for half the price somewhere else? And it's just constantly kind of making judgment calls on like, where can I save a penny? Where can I charge a penny? Kind of like that.
But I do think Omaha in general does an amazing job of supporting small businesses, family-owned, instead of going out to, you can go to Costco and buy cookies that are pretty inexpensive, but you're not going to taste the love that she puts into her oatmeal cookies.
Right. Yep.
So I do think that most of our clients in Omaha know that the value that they're getting, there's an exchange for that. And I think most people are very awesome in that regard.
Yes.
So I find that anyway. So they know what they're paying for, and they appreciate the time and the effort and the quality of the product and the quality of the time that's gone into what's being made.
There's a specific cookie chain that moved in about a year and a half or 2 years ago, and I remember there were, for the first couple weeks it was open, it was lines out the door, it was selling everything, it was all over social media, and I was like, people, if you get out of line and go get a cookie at Sweet Mag's, get a cinnamon roll at a Catered Affair, you will never want one of these nationally produced cookies that were made by people who aren't even bakers ever again. And I think that understanding has started to come in. And yeah, some of those places can charge a little bit lower prices because they're franchise out and everything. But when you can taste the quality and the difference, I do agree. I think Omaha is pretty understanding about that. And of course, there are some people who aren't. But for the most part, I think what you said is true.
I think managing your prices is super important. And for me, I'm lucky because it's just me. I don't have any help. I don't have any employees. Even if I need them, I don't have them. I don't have any room for them. But I decided, based just what you said just made me think about it. I pay a fortune for butter because I buy Land O'Lakes butter, and it's $5.79 a pound. It's a lot. I'm buying 36 pounds every week and a half, so that's a lot. I manage my other pricing. I live in a tiny little house. My baking pantry is about the size of this table, and so is my kitchen, actually. But if I can get the staples that I'm going to need at a really low price, I'll buy 50 pounds of flour, 50 pounds of sugar. Although, you know what? It never works out because I'll buy that extra and then suddenly my phone will ring off the hook and all that is gone in a big hurry. But because it's just me and I'm not having to pay employees and I don't have all those other costs, I spend more money on ingredients, but I think you can taste it, so it's worth it. I charge a little bit more, but I'm using Highland cream and King Arthur flour, and they're better. Ghirardelli chocolate.
Oh, trust me, you can taste it.
Well, you can. You can taste it when it's made with love. It sounds so cliche, but it's not at all. Mm-hmm. It's like the croissants. I'm hand rolling those things. A roller would be so great, a sheeter. Oh, it would just be wonderful, but I'm rolling that thing out, and I'm pounding that butter block with my rolling pin, and those things are filled with so much love that if you want to go buy a $1 croissant at Costco, go ahead, but you're not going to get that.
Mm-hmm. I say that all the time about you got to make it with love, and it starts with really good ingredients being made by hand with love, and you can. I know that sounds silly, but I do think you can taste it when you eat food that's made with a lot of care and intention.
I'm loving this conversation. Any chance that this podcast had of being sponsored by Costco is just going out the window, unfortunately. No, I don't care about that. Kathy, you've said something several times that I think is really interesting, especially regarding the product mix. You say you kind of go by gut feel, and that's restaurant life. It's knowing how much to make, how much to charge, things like that. How long did it take to develop kind of that gut feeling? Because, if I jumped in right now, I'd have no idea how much to bake. Is it years, months? You're still figuring it out? Like, what is it? Yeah?
Some days I feel like I'm starting from scratch. I've been doing this for, 35 years. So it takes a minute. You just have to, but it's a gut feeling, I think. And I think any business is that way, whether you're building houses or, making cookies, whatever business you're in, there's a portion of it that there's a gut feeling that you have to just move on. And as soon as you think you got it figured out, someone will come in and take your knees out. So, but that's what I love about it, is it's new every day. Every day I get to start over. And every day is a new challenge. And every day I get to do something, make somebody happy.
So it's invigorating. It's not,
100%.
We've focused mostly on how it's kind of frustrating, but it's life-giving as well.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. When you show, when somebody's like, this is the best of whatever it is that they're having, or, you've done something for someone's wedding, or you've been at someone's birthday. You get to celebrate people on the greatest days of their lives. Or, the biggest compliment to me is when people bring in their family or their friends to meet us and come in and have whatever they're having that day, and they feel like they get a hug when they come in. And I think for us, that's our biggest compliment.
Is that what keeps you guys going too?
For sure. That is the why, right? Like, if it wasn't for the people, you wouldn't do it, because it is really hard work.
But, and like, I think to your point, like you have to be adaptable, and it can feel defeating at times, but it also makes it so there's never a boring day. And, it fills your cup because you're thinking on your feet, you're strategizing, and you're getting the gratification of people coming in saying, hey, I really appreciate what you do.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I think you guys can maybe speak to this a little bit more, but Stacey, I think you've started to get into this a little bit, so feel free to comment if you want to add anything. But sweet versus savory baking, I'm really interested in this. Like, in your minds, when you think of the difference between those two things, what's the difference? The biggest difference. Obviously, there's differences.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think it's perhaps easier to make something sweet that is going to be a, grand slam. Savory baking is a little bit more nuanced, where like you're playing to a different market than, like most people love chocolate chip cookies, but like finding a savory flavor that is really going to like hit it out of the park with your clientele is a different ball game. And then also understanding, like, I think back to the whole like formula that you're working off of, like balancing your salt and your sugar and making sure that like for yeasted products, like, am I like still like balancing the yeast in a way that, or the sugar in a way that is like my yeast is still gonna like thrive and I'm gonna have a well-risen product. There's just, it's a different formula than the sweet formula that you have down pat.
And I think putting the right savory ingredients together is a huge deal breaker. I think you can't just take savory products and make a scone. Like, you've got to have the right cheese that has the right flavor to it, and that has again, it comes back to science a little bit. You've got to utilize the correct savory products. Where I think with sweet, you can put anything sweet together and it's going to be yummy, and a little drizzle of something and you're off to the races.
For sure.
Where you've got to be a little bit more intentional on how you pair those flavors together.
Yeah, you can't glaze a savory scone and like save the day.
Yep.
You've got to like nail it like in the formula.
Yep. That's exactly right. So tonight I talked with my daughter about croissants, and I thought that I was going to bring some really unique croissants tonight. We had pesto, one rosemary, sun-dried tomato, mozzarella burrata, and in the end I was lazy. But one of the things I love about my croissants is when they come out of that oven, you just glaze them with that sugar, simple syrup. And I thought, well, I can't glaze them with the simple syrup because who wants that? I've thought about doing some savory baking, but in the end, I think my customers like sugar more than they like a tomato croissant. So if you want a tomato croissant, I'll make one for you gladly. But everything they said is exactly right. Those flavor profiles can kill you if you don't do it just right. And I don't think the market is quite as big. So then again, you get into that. How many do you make? Do I make 24 scones or do I make 3? And if you're going to make 3, you're not making any.
I mean, I've become, and a lot thanks to you guys, I've become a huge fan of savory baking, probably more so than sweet. I think I've probably eaten my body weight in everything Parmesan buns at this point. If you follow me on social media, you've seen so many posts for these things. You're probably sick of them, but you should go get one or several because they're unbelievable. How do you market these things that maybe people are a little bit unfamiliar with, where yeah, everybody knows a chocolate chip cookie. Everybody knows a funfetti cupcake, things like that. Everybody can understand a fudge brownie. But if you've got a feta and arugula scone that is delicious, or if you've got the everything parm buns, obviously they're visually arresting, but do you just put those things in the case, or is it a matter of promoting them more on social media?
I know the answer. you get Dan Hoppen to try one. That's what you do.
That's not
That is
the
a trusty
answer.
way.
It is,
That's
man.
not the answer.
Yeah, pretty much. When Dan Hoppen tries it, your phone rings.
I will say it is a lot of just patience and persistence and like repeatedly telling people, I promise this is great. I will say I had been spinning my wheels on everything Parmesan buns for about a year and a half before you really like brought it home, and now they're a permanent menu item. So I will say thank you for that.
That might be my life's greatest accomplishment.
But yeah, I think just like encouraging people to expand their horizons and be like, oh, like, you know, I know that you always get this pastry, but I think you're gonna like this if you try it. And just a little bit of encouragement can go a long way.
And social media.
And social media.
I think a lot of it has to do with just getting people, it gives them an idea,
Yes.
really. And I think taste, you know, doing tasters, having samples out so that people don't have to make a commitment to whatever that savory item is, so that maybe you have taste that people can be like, I didn't know that I liked this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I do think that like this isn't just for savory, but just like in getting people to try something new, I have found it really helpful to tell a story and say like, this is what this means to me, and this is why I created this product. Whether it's like a story from your childhood, or like just like it's like nostalgia, or like something that you tried on a trip that really like, you know, for whatever reason was just like chef's kiss, and it's like these were the influences that I used to create this product, and I am really excited to share it with you. And then people are like, amazing, like I get to be a part of this person's like story, or like they're sharing this experience with me, and that's special.
What's an example of that?
Well, I think the most obvious one for me is our cardamom knot. And like, you know, it is a traditional Swedish pastry, but for me personally, it goes back to growing up in my hometown. It's a tiny town, like a couple hours west of here. And there was one of our next door neighbors made this amazing bread every Christmas. And she'd bring these like beautiful, like fluffy loaves of bread over to our house. And she refused to give us the recipe because she was like, this is family recipe. I'm never sharing it. Like, so sorry, like I'll bring it to you every Christmas, but like you're never getting this recipe. And I never, like, until about 8 years ago, I never knew what was in that bread that was making it so great. And then I was playing around with a Swedish cookbook and was making cardamom knots, and it clicked that like Sue's bread had cardamom in it. And that's like, yeah, I just like created these knots that to me remind me of Christmas growing up in my hometown when Sue would bring her bread over. But a lot of people didn't know what cardamom knots were until I started putting them in the case, and they're like, what is this? And then I could like have that opportunity to share that story, and also that it's like is traditionally Swedish. So it's kind
That's
of
a
fun.
great story.
Stacey, you just shared a knowing look with your
Oh.
table over there. Did you have an item that comes to mind?
Well, the knowing look was about not giving away recipes. But, you know, I have a few things, but probably the biggest one that I have is my German chocolate cake. It's my mom's recipe. It's the only cake I make that's not fancy, and that's exactly what I tell people. I'm not decorating it with ganache or icing or anything like that. It's 3 layers of cake, or 2, but they're split, and there's the traditional coconut, walnut, caramelized, butterscotchy icing between it that really you could just eat out of the pan. Not that I would know that last week, but it is so good, and that's every time I make that cake for someone, I see my mom. And yeah, it's that's just something.
What about you, Kathy? Do you have a pastry like that?
guess I'm boring. I don't. We just make things we like to eat. I think.
Yeah.
I think that's our entire kind of concept is we just make things that we love and that we like, and we're constantly just trying to make them better. I think my mom wasn't a great cook, and that might be part of it. Is my mom made like 3 things. My brothers are always like, if I ever see a stuffed pepper ever again. And so I think that's a lot why we are Scratch Made Kitchen. We like to just make everything, the flavor needs to be there, and it needs to just taste delicious.
I wanted to ask you two about the art of the pastry case, because your shops have pastry cases. A lot of times people may not come in to get a specific item, but they just come in because I want to go to Sweet Mag's today, or I'm
Yeah.
coming in to grab a coffee, and then, oh, there's that cinnamon roll. I need that. What's the art of the pastry case? Like, how do you decide what goes where? Like, what goes on the bottom shelf versus the middle shelves? Like, do you position certain things so kids see them? Like, how when you're arranging this thing, what are some of the considerations that you take into account?
I mean, there is some strategy that goes to it. I think, like, you learn as you serve customers, like, kind of like what should go where in terms of like ease and like what things will catch people's eyes, or what position things will be in when they catch people's eyes. And like it does like kind of shift throughout the day, you know, like you have your scones in one place, and like once those start to get low, you can shift something else to be like more front and center. And yeah, I mean, people are like relatively simple, you know, like if it is in the front, they are more likely to pay attention to it. Another like great trick is to bring it out right as somebody is ordering and be like, and they're like, ooh, what's that? So yeah, I think artful plating is incredibly important. You can't just throw it out there and like hope that it sells itself. Like, it needs to be neat. It needs to be beautiful. People will, you know, eat with their eyes. So, yeah.
I think we try and put things that are a little bit more unusual, that are more eye level, and things that are more like cinnamon rolls. You can easily identify what those are. So, and I'm short, so those usually tend to be on the top, and then they just kind of rotate out. But like we just started a cookie thing on our counter, and we can't keep it full. I'm like, been doing this now for how long? Who knew people would just get cookies? And a lot of it is just how you display it. It's how you put it out. You know, how you present things is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And then Stacey, on the other hand, you know, you don't have the storefront, so you don't have the pastry case. If someone is seeing a buttered marshmallow cake, either you have to put it on social media and they have to see it there, or a customer has to put it out there and you have to hope that they have a lot of followers or people are seeing it. How important is it for you to really stay on top of social media and make sure that you have a schedule and you're consistently posting to make sure that people remember you and know that you're there?
It's highly critical because I don't advertise any other way. And if I'm gone on a vacation far away, or I'm busy and I'm not posting on social media, I feel it, and I feel it quickly. And it takes a lot longer to recover from not posting regularly than it does to, well, it just takes a long time. I don't even know the analogy. But if I just have to do it all the time. And it seems like if I'm posting regularly, then the orders are coming in for whatever I post. But I know last summer I spent a lot of time golfing and not enough time posting, and I paid the price for that for a long time. So, yeah, if I don't post, I'm in trouble. If I don't post, the orders aren't coming in regularly all the time.
How do you guys come up with new dishes or specials? Where are you drawing inspiration from most frequently?
Everywhere. I mean, I'm a geek. I like to read cookbooks. I'm constantly looking at things online. I love to eat, so we eat out a lot. And I'm, always thinking, how can I take that and just twist it or change it or tweak it? And then, having fun with, just cooking in general, going in the walk-in and grabbing things and see how it works out.
Yeah, I think just a variety of places. I feel like something I've talked about already tonight, and I've talked about a lot historically, is pulling, it's very nostalgic. I pull from life, I pull from memories, something as simple as the month of October reminds me of being on the volleyball bus driving to some volleyball tournament, and Bailey's mom has made double-decker PB&J sandwiches, and how do I convert that memory into a cookie? And I feel like that is a big way, one of the main ways that I drive creativity and innovation in the products that we're putting out. But also just travel and experiencing other people's food and cookbooks and social media, and latching on to, a lot of times I'll see so-and-so made like this toast with ricotta and like poached peaches, and it's like, okay, like I love that flavor combination. How do I take that out of, I don't want to make a toast, but like let's put that into a scone, or let's put that into a cinnamon roll, and just like taking inspiration, like little pieces of inspiration from a number of places and putting them all together into one thing that like is really cohesive and like your own thing.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing. I do love to use fresh produce as much as I can, incorporate it into my flavors. So it's all based on whatever is in season. Berry season is my absolute favorite time of the year. So you can do so much with that. But otherwise, it's just, oh, look at that great picture. What can I do? How can I make that into something I'm doing? Inspiration from others. I copy Katina.
If you're gonna copy somebody,
Yeah.
she's not a bad one to copy.
And we get a lot of clients too that'll call us and say, I want this. Can you make this? And sometimes that's what spearheads some things that end up amazing,
For sure.
amazing items on our menu. So
That's interesting you say that, because I get those calls too. We all do. But what's interesting to me is when they say, I've asked 3 bakeries to make me this, and they all say no. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll make that. What? Now tell me what I just agreed to. It's surprising to me that any small bakery or local bakery would say no to something, because it just gives you such an opportunity to really expand out.
Do you have an example of that? Something that you put on your menu because somebody asked for it and then it kind of blew up?
Oh, yeah. The Bananas Foster cake. Brandy Steiner was getting married, and her husband's favorite cake or favorite dessert was Bananas Foster. Nobody would make it. So I said, oh, sure, I'll make it. I don't know, what do I do? And I did some research in it, just kind of thinking about what Bananas Foster was, and decided I was not going to do a banana cake because that's not what Bananas Foster is. So I make a cream cake, do the Bananas Foster filling, and you'll always see on my Facebook page when I'm firing that Bananas Foster, I'm always taking a live video of it and posting it while it's happening. So it's that, and then the rum buttercream, and there you go. You have a Bananas Foster cake. And I make that cake a lot now, a lot, for people, because thank you to whatever bakeries in town said they would not do it. Appreciate that.
Katina, I feel like you were about to say something there and I cut you off.
Oh, no. I think mostly I used to be so much more, I guess, open or able to say yes to those things. And, like, I do love saying yes to those things. And I want to, like, experiment and play around with those. But, like, growth just has limited the things that I can say yes to. And having a staff that, like, I can't just be like, oh, today we're making a Bananas Foster's cake. And they're like, what is that? And, I do feel like growth has made me less, like, nimble or less open to saying yes to, like, more of those creative ventures. But it is really fun when you are able to, because it expands your skill set and, like, has you trying something new.
Sure.
So.
What are some current trends in baking that excite you guys? Anything new on the horizon that really has you excited to experiment with?
It's funny because you say that, and I'm like, the only thing that comes to mind is something that I am personally not on board with.
What is that?
And it is the, like, cookie dough croissant, cookie dough,
Oh,
dough in everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And just like, let's just let croissants be croissants. Croissants are great. We don't need them to be cookie croissants. But
And I'm not a fad person. Like I live in the middle. I like to maybe kind of veer a little bit, but I try and kind of stay. I think sometimes people get goofy with some things that you have to bring in really weird ingredients, or there's a weird procedure, and I don't flex very well. I bend, but I don't. I break sometimes.
That's something else I wanted to ask you guys about, because I assume a lot of people in here know what the cookie croissants are. It's gone viral on social media, but if you don't know, it's basically a croissant that's cut open and it's got cookie dough in the middle, and then there's cookie dough on top too. And it's just kind of ridiculous, but for some reason the internet has become enthralled by it and absolutely loves it. Like, can we go too far with innovation in baking where it's just like, what are we doing? Are we even baking anymore? Or are we just cutting things up and throwing ingredients together?
Yeah, I think that is, I like sort of like reject that that's even innovation. Like,
Right.
it's sort of just like excess for the sake of excess, and like maybe it's good, or like maybe there's a market for it, but like I don't think that it is like really like creative or like pushing
There's
boundaries.
no craft.
Yeah, like
There's no
it's
craft to it.
it's not as artful as I would hope innovation in baking would be. So nothing really comes to mind in terms of like something that I'm really excited about right now. I feel like there was a moment there where like cake design was kind of like going wild, and we were really moving away from like, you know, the really like simplistic like rough edge like or naked cakes, or like there was like a 6-year period there where it was just like everything was like kind of overly simplified, and now we're really into vintage cakes and like
And smudge. The smudgy cakes
yes.
are really in right now.
like
so.
squills, which like I love it. Like make it quirky, make it whimsical. Very into that. But yeah, like I feel like we're awaiting the next bakery trend.
What are some essential skills that you feel like any baker, whether it's someone who wants to bake professionally or even just a home baker, should master?
Precision.
Consistency.
Yeah.
Are there any mistakes that you see people consistently make that you would try and coach them on and help them through?
I think measurement. I think weighing things. I think a lot of times people, a cup of flour, there's a huge change to a cup of flour. Right. So is it fluffy flour? Is it, weight, I think weighing things, I think make a tremendous difference.
Oh, it's huge.
Tell me more about that, because I think a lot of people, when they follow a recipe, that it'll say use 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of sugar, a couple teaspoons of vanilla, whatever it might be. But you guys professionally are actually weighing things out as opposed to doing that. What's the benefit to weighing versus just putting stuff in a measuring cup?
Consistency. Whether I make it or the guy 3 tables down makes it, it weighs the same. So you didn't fluff something. You didn't,
Right.
Maybe you didn't flatten off the top of the measuring spoon. It takes that there is no equation. It's either correct on the scale or not.
Right. So a spooned and leveled cup of flour is probably going to be about 20% more flour than your recipe actually calls for if you weigh it. Because a measuring cup of flour is never full if you're using a cup of flour. It's just not full. But if you fill that up, it's a lot more than you actually need.
Okay, we're getting down. We got about 5 minutes left here, but I want to hit you guys with some quick hitters before we get out of here. Favorite baked good of all time?
Chocolate chip cookies.
Almond croissants.
Pie,
What kind of pie?
the kind in a crust.
Okay, fair enough. I guess you just answered this, Stacey, but cake or pie?
Pie.
Pie.
Wow, really all pie? Favorite kind of pie for you guys then?
Lemon meringue or cherry.
Our salted honey.
That sounds really good.
Apple or chicken pot pie.
Oh, you're going into the savory.
Yeah, I love chicken
I can
pot
get down
pie.
with that.
Yeah.
Most difficult baked good to master?
Lemon cake.
Why?
Oh, the acid in it. Oh my gosh. It's just, it either rises or it's as dense as a really overmixed pancake. Lemon cake is hard. I use fresh lemon. It just, haven't mastered it yet, but I keep trying. It's still good. It's just different every time.
Pastry. I think pastry's difficult.
Yeah.
Temperature's so different.
Yeah, toss up between macarons or like danishes or like puff pastry.
Baker you most look up to?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you. I would say Joy Wilson.
Carly's my pastry chef, and she's taught me anything and everything. So and she's self-taught, and I love self-taught. I just think that's amazing.
Shout out Carly. I think we've got her in the room tonight, so thank you. And I want to get you guys out of here on a positive note because we've talked a lot about the challenges and, increasing prices and, trying to get people to try new things. But there is a joy in it that you guys talked about a little bit too. Like, what is it like when someone comes to you and says, "Will you make my wedding cake?" Like, that's the best day of someone's life. Or for a lot of people, their birthday is the greatest day of the year. If they say, "I want 3 dozen cookies for my birthday party," what is that feeling like for you guys? And how does that help you push through the early mornings, the times when the cake doesn't rise, the disasters, the times when social media isn't popping off? What are those moments like for you?
Like truly life-giving. Like that. I mean, it's like I said earlier, like it is the why behind what you do. Like you are a part of people's like best days, and there's something that's like just incredibly heartwarming about that. And I know that I've mentioned this before on a podcast that we did together, but like I literally, like on someone's wedding day, will play my Shania Twain because I remember listening to that as a little girl and being like romanticizing what a wedding day would be like. And it's like, I'm making this person's wedding cake. They're feeling the most love today, and I get to be a part of it. And like, what a cool experience that is to get to be like forever, like part of this person's memories on this day.
I feel really blessed because every single one of my customers is happy when they come to pick up from my window because they're picking up for something good and positive all the time, and they're all smiling when they get there, and I hand them their cake, and generally the box, they can see what's in the cake, and they smile and they're grateful, and it's like, oh my gosh, every person I deal with in person is happy at my work. How often does that happen? Every single day for me. That's how lucky I am.
The answer to that question is not very often. I think there are very few people in this room who have jobs where they can say that.
Yeah.
I think it reminds me that people are kind. I think that it's lovely to see people that are just happy with something so simple as a cake or a muffin or, and this has made their day or their wedding cake or, it's just fun to see people to remember that small things matter.
There's something so wildly wholesome about someone getting excited about a cookie.
Yes, I mean, it's just, that sounds silly, but like, it's lovely. It's just it's lovely. You forget that sometimes.
Well, I can't think of a better way to cap off this conversation than that. Kathy, Katina, and Stacey, thank you so much for taking the time to come and do this podcast tonight and for just all the hard work that you've put into creating your businesses and pushing through the frustrating times, the long hours, the early mornings. Just genuinely, thank you. Yes, let's all thank them.
But Dan, thank you for supporting us. I can't tell you how amazing you are. It genuinely is amazing. So
this isn't about me. This is about you. Don't you try and turn that around on me,
but it
Kathy.
makes it. I mean, for us, it makes a
It
difference.
does make a
It
difference.
really does. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So
Very appreciative of it.
Well, if you guys ever need me to come in and eat some cinnamon rolls or cookies, twist my arm. We'll see what I can do. Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.